2012 gaming investments. Whether or not you should be worried about investments in games? Short answer, no. Why? I'll tell you about.
Long answer, no.
No. All right, common investor objections and what they really mean, and also what all this means about what you should be doing. So, where am I coming from? So, I was undergrad business with a focus on business strategy. I was an in-house analyst for many, many years at old school businesses, where I did really well, but decided that's not my passion, and I need to go into working with more entrepreneurs. So I started Ultralight Startups, which was New York City's first entrepreneur gaming hub. And from there, which was a lot of coaching, business model, and investment scene navigation, I was like, man, games, they're pretty freaking cool. So last 4 years, I've been in games. Biggest achievement to date is this place you're staying at, Yeti. 6,500 developers in the last year have attended our various events. And then on the Yeti Accelerator side, we have about 700 applicants for every accelerator round. And actually some of our companies in the next round are in the audience. Right? So also at the accelerator end, a very, very large, intensive investor network. Quick peek at our board in case you don't recognize some of these faces. Mayfield Fund, Excel, IBG, Bloomberg, Intel, you name it. If they've done any kind of gaming investments in the last few years, we have them at the accelerator board for Yeti. So, should you be worried about gaming investments?
No.
Not yet. Hold on. Alright, so media. This is a TechCrunch post. Game industry report. M&A hits $4 billion for games, but social gaming investment plummets by $1 billion. This is a VentureBeat post. Game acquisition set new record at $4 billion, but investments tumble 57%. This is what you guys have been reading, right? Sound familiar? And then, a week later, again by VentureBeat, same writer, actually not a week, a month later, same writer, and this time the number is 42%. How the number actually got better, I don't know, but that's another conversation. So, all of this, you don't have to be worried about gaming investments. And this is why. So all of these numbers are actually comparing apples and oranges. They count within them seed, Kickstarter, as well as follow-on investment. Now, I'll give you a couple of reasons why you actually should not be counting any of this if you want an accurate understanding of the gaming investment landscape. One, if you're looking at Kickstarter and seed, you're looking mostly at individuals. Individuals who are investing because they're passionate about the game, they're passionate about the team. It's very much driven by followers for a certain brand or a vision. You can't really learn how to actually prepare better for your investment round with the numbers that you're seeing here and with their understanding of why seed and Kickstarter works. What you could do to succeed is actually build a huge following. And sometimes it takes your entire career. So Double Fine, very famous Kickstarter campaign. That brand, that designer had been around. Actually, Double Fine had been around for 12 years before they actually did that campaign. And so unless...
And Tim Schafer,
exactly,
who made it, had been around for, what, 20 years? Yeah.
Much longer, right? So if you are a well-known game design brand, consumer-facing game design brand, right? It's not enough of all your peers know you. You want to make sure that the end user knows you as a game design brand, then yes, please do try Kickstarter. If you're not, it's a waste of time. Actually, the numbers for Kickstarter funding for games goes down from 50% of all campaigns to 23%. And the reason is, a lot of people who aren't well-known brands are actually trying Kickstarter and failing. Follow-on venture rounds. So what I mean by this is that when you are looking at venture rounds that happen in some other year, so before 2012, and you're looking at someone doubling down, or a couple of investors doubling down on that investment, that's a follow-on venture round. That's not a very accurate number to look at to understand, hey, what's the gaming investment appetite for? Because really, all it shows with that number in which you have those combined is like, hey, any companies that got a Series A financing, did their investors and other investors who invest in their Series B feel that they actually met their growth expectations with that Series A financing? It doesn't give you a good sense of, hey, gaming investment appetite, what is it at an early stage level? It's, again, apples and oranges. So what should you look at, now that I've told you all the reasons why those numbers are bad for you to look at for your gaming investment appetite? All right, so first venture financing. Very specific definition here. This is your first venture round in 2012, plus any second round if it happened within the same year as the first venture round. So So that's the number we look at. It's true apples to apple. It is very hypothesis driven, right? So the investors who are actually investing in this at a venture round, they're like, okay, I believe certain types of games and certain types of businesses will work. And this is a traction I'm looking at in those businesses, and now let me invest in them, right? So you basically get a better sense of what are the patterns in traction and social proof that the investor is looking for. So now we come to the common investor objections and what they really mean based on the numbers in 2012. So, something you may have heard before. I only invest in picks and shovels. I don't invest in game studios. I don't like the content risk. Which essentially is saying, hey, you game studio making a game, I'm not going to invest in you, right? Well, when you look at the numbers, this is the type of gaming investments in 2012. So number of investments, what percentage went to game studios versus platforms? Game studios actually did better than the picks and shovels / platforms. So what does that objection really mean? So it really means I have no idea if your game's going to be good. I have no idea if the players are going to like it. I also don't know how long you're going to be able to get those players coming back, and once they do, how much they're going to be spending in the game. And by the way, when you do show me numbers proving that the market says that all those things are true, all those good things, you need to show me better numbers than you did the year before, because I just think the market is very competitive. And it also means I no longer trust my 13-year-old son's idea on whether or not your game's going to succeed. They realize that's a bad idea. Little Johnny here may know a great game, but he doesn't know if you can distribute it and market it. So another objection. Any questions on the last one? Was it clear? Okay. So there are fewer green pastures for game studios. There are a lot more left for platforms. So I only look for platforms. And my personal pet peeve about this kind of objection is, well, if you don't ever invest in game studios, how the hell do you know what's going to make for a good platform? But anyways, the numbers show this is partially right. So percentage of investments in game studios, 2011 versus 2012. This actually did fall. So 74% in 2011, 51% in 2012. So it fell by about 23%. But if you look at the dollar value, 53% to 45%. So the dollar value actually only fell 8%. So what does that mean? I'll get to you in a second. That means that you had fewer gaming studio investments, but larger round sizes. So, and that's the average deal size for game studios, 9.54. So it's gone up by about 2.85 million. These are millions of numbers. Did you have a question, Bill?
Yeah, and these are
Sorry?
This is still first round?
This is first round and any second round that happened the same year. So if you got your Series A and B within 2012, you were counted.
So the first round for a game studio in 2012?
Sorry?
First round for a game studio in 2012 was around 10 million.
So first round in 2000, so this is counting companies, anomaly, there were a couple of numbers and there are a couple of companies that got their Series A and Series B in the same year.
Yeah.
So because of that, the overall average went up. So that's what's happening in the numbers. I'll get to all of your other questions in a second. Just maybe get to the point of why all this matters to you and what you should be doing. So these are all of that together. Now, what that objection really means is that I don't know if you're the right game studio investment for me. Prove it to me with traction. So, what should you do? If you have social proof, which means you were C-level staff that are well-known, like, game studio that had exits, your employees, early employees of well-known gaming startups use it. By the way, this may still not work. There are a lot of teams out there with great team histories and still not able to raise money. If you do not have social proof, what you need to focus on is data use, ARPDAUs, the right level for those numbers. It's very dependent on your genre of games, and it's a moving target. It changes all the time. And the Zen here has some ideas about what you should be looking at for that.
She sprung this on me last minute, so I jotted down what I think are some very key statistics to take home on this. The most important metric is actually the DAU over the MAU. So, in other words, how many of your players are playing on a daily basis versus a monthly basis. What this does is it shows you two things. It shows you engagement. It shows you engagement and also your growth. So a good game that has really good engagement and really good growth is going to be about 20%. So about 20% of your daily active users is the number of your monthly active users. If it's lower than 20%, that means that they're not a very active user base. They just come in occasionally. If it's over 20%, if it's way over 20%, like 60, 70%, that means that you have a dead game. It's not growing. There's no new users coming into the game. So you want to hit around 20% or above. Quick note on that: Facebook killed the numbers statistically when they were first coming out. So they had previously websites were about 5%. Facebook hit 50%. So they had insane engagement. People were coming back day after day after day on their user base. So investors, depending on the stage that they're looking at, either want to see growth or they want to see really good engagement.
And also there's some standard 7-day ARPU numbers, right?
Yes.
So there's these standards in their mind that if you're not hitting those standards, you have to have a very, very good reason why. So the 7-day...
Yeah, if you want to know what those are, they're a little, again, it's very dependent on the genre. It depends on, the more hardcore your game is, the higher the engagement numbers are going to be, but the lower the growth numbers are. So it depends on the genre, but for 1-day engagement, 7-day, and 30-day, typically for 1 day you want to see over 30%. For 7-day you want to see over 20, 25%. Maybe let's say 20%. And for 30-day, that's a really big range depending on the genre. I won't touch that
So
here.
when we say genre, that means when you are pitching and you have a game of, say, RPG midcore, they are comparing you to all the numbers they know for that 7-day, 30-day retention, based on the big companies who are after that market out there, like Kabam, and also all the other pitches that they're seeing. So that's why we say it's dependent on genre and it's a moving target, because it increases every time they see more investments in your bets.
So that ratio is going to determine whether or not the investor has any interest in you, your DAU or MAU. But then what determines the dollar size, like how much are you going to raise? Well, a really rough estimate of thumb is the number of daily active users you have. Each one is worth about $1. So if you've got 250,000 users that are daily actives, you could probably raise about $250,000. So if you want to get $1 million in funding, you better hit 1 million daily active users. Just rough bet. And then one last stat.
Make this more complicated. I'm like, oh my God, all these numbers. Let's never raise money.
So she also brought up another one that is hugely fluctuating, which is your ARPDAU. That fluctuates radically depending on the genre. But if you're I'm going to give a really rough rule of thumb. If you're under $1 ARPDAU, forget it. You're not raising. You need to get that over $1. And by how much depends on the genre. So the more hardcore your game is, the more money you need to make per user, because you're going to have a lower user base overall. But it's also going to be a much more engaged user. So those are some rough
Thank you, Zen.
stats.
All right, so if you are considering raising, I'm surprised at how we actually don't talk about this in games very much, but this is a very, very simple startup rule. Know what stage of the startup life cycle you were on, right? So discovery, validation, efficiency, and scale. For the sake of simplicity, these are, yes, and Thomas and I were talking about this. I'm like, where are all your startups? He's like, I don't know, somewhere in here. So anyways, for simplicity's sake, these are the different stages of a startup life cycle. Any company that makes it to exit is actually past scale. Everyone goes to discovery, validation, efficiency, and scale. In games, discovery is the point where you probably have an idea. Validation is when you have a prototype and you've gotten some numbers like, hey, some people like this, right? That is when you should talk to seed and angels. You should not be talking to venture capitalists. Venture capitalists come in after you actually have the traction numbers that Jacob talked about, which generally happens at efficiency and scale, right? Can you wait? Yeah. So basically, the point at which you are interested in venture capitalists is this one. If you're talking to them too early here, they will always, always, always take a meeting with you. Can anyone guess why? Even if they're never going to invest in you, why would they take a meeting with you when you're earlier? Any guesses?
So they know what you're up to and they can compare. It's like
exactly learning. So they are getting educated at your expense. So I always find it very funny when I do an annual investor panel at Yeti Zen every year, and I also did one at GameSpeed about 2 years ago, and I made all the investors say, hey, what amount do you actually invest? And they all kind of made it sound like later stage, above certain millions. They were somewhere over here. And then at the end of the panel, I had all these people rushing towards the one guy who sounded the smartest that was actually never going to invest in these stages, right? I also find it interesting that more and more when we have our investor panels at Yeti Zen, no one ever says clearly, hey, I'm never going to invest in a company here. because they all want to take your meetings at this stage. You're wasting your time. You're educating them. You should just focus on the seed and angel people at this stage, rather than go to venture capital. Go to venture capital when you're at this stage. A few people in the audience will kill me after this talk. So, if you are at efficiency and scale and considering raising, you got to arm yourself with the right knowledge, the right mentorship, the right partnership deals, the right way to actually separate yourself from the pack of people who either don't have enough traction or don't have the self-awareness to know what stage for the startup you're in, right? If you are at this stage, we would love to talk to you because that's where we can really help companies at the Yeti Accelerator. If you're earlier, please do keep coming to the Innovation Lab events. That's why we want to actually help a lot of people. We touch a lot of companies through that. And you know, that's why we do events like this one. Right? So if you're not raising, but you really, really like the game industry and you want to help it, what can you do? So, one, inspire more gaming angels. So, as you know from my background, I was actually working consumer web for a long time. And the reason why I find this very strange coming from consumer web is there's very few gaming people who had exits in games who are now putting that money back into the gaming ecosystem. I think that's for two reasons. One, Disney. You can blame them for it. This is on video. I should really not be saying this. So Disney has a very interesting clause in all of their exit deals, saying that if you, the founder, sell to Disney, you may not invest in, work with, or advise any company that is in gaming. So even if you sold a web game product to Disney, you know, imagine the exits were web games to Disney last several years, and mobile came up. You couldn't advise a mobile game company, you couldn't invest in a mobile game company, and by some lawyer accounts that may even include board games. So that's one of the reasons why. You know, Disney, having done some of the biggest investments, actually essentially took out all those founders from the table of people who can actually invest in games. The second reason is, in terms of gaming investments, we have a very nascent pay-it-forward culture. We have a very strong pay-it-forward culture, like, hey, let me help you with game design, how you work in your game, but not in terms of investments. So anyone who makes their money with games, even if they've been released by the Disney lockup, you know, they no longer are in it, because it lasts for about, by my estimate, from the folks I've talked to, about 2 to 3 years. They're thinking, oh, how can I do my next startup, put my own money into it, rather than how do I invest in other gaming entrepreneurs who used to be where I used to be, right? So, if you know anyone who's made any money in games and they're like, I don't know what I should do with this, maybe I'll go to Y, buy a Lexus, tell them to invest in other gaming startups. Okay, if you know game angels, connect them with us. And this is not self-serving. This is actually, you know, as you know, we work with the efficiency and scale point of accelerator startups. So the earlier stage startups, we're going to, if we get enough traction, enough angels together, we're just going to have open investor days for companies that, you know, apply and compete. But it all depends on all of you helping us get a huge number of angels where it's worthwhile for the pitchers. And then lastly, come teach what you know through our events. We have this really awesome space. I mean, like, don't you like it? Look at all the art, look at the zen, look at the zen. You know, we have this amazing space. We do 4 of our own events every month. We do our game developer workshop, we have state of the industry, we have road to success. But we'd love for the community to be using it more. Come to us with your own event ideas. Maybe there's something you can teach other game developers that will help them make better businesses, better games. We got to raise all ships and really make this an industry where investors are like, I don't have an option but to invest in these companies. And they are less likely to believe the crap that the media is putting out there about gaming investments going down, right? So let's all help raise all ships in the industry. And this space, the vision behind the space, is to help you guys, you know, do all of that. We've worked our butts off for the last 1.5 years and more, right? And we've done this without raising any money from traditional venture capitalists, so we can do things like this. So please, use it. All right, so thank you.